I'm recording now too.
Wow.
There's the clap from me. Wow.
Oh,
Wow.
Nice. Oh, yeah, I'll do a clap.
Freaking Owen Wilson over here.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, so as I was telling you earlier, if my audio sounds super bad, it's because
Right.
I'm on a bad microphone today.
Excuses, dude. Excuses. You got to bring a pro setup everywhere you go.
I know,
I mean,
yeah.
we are podcasters.
Yeah.
I think, what is this, amateur hour? You know?
I hope it's not amateur hour.
Yeah, I also hope not.
Yeah, if it's amateur hour, we're in trouble.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, look at that. That's a clip. Okay, it's fine. I got to stop looking at the waveform. I just worried. I've already said I'm worried that this audio is going to come out and just be like horrible, but it's fine. It'll be horrible.
Well, we had what listens on the last one, so those people will be really mad.
We might get. I'm gonna bleep that out. I gotta bleep that out.
What the number of listens?
We have we have a reputation to keep up here.
Oh man, I love this. I love how much secretive information there is on this podcast. It really adds to the plausible deniability thing. It's like when you read an old, when there's like a CIA document from the 70s released, but half of it's just blacked out, so it doesn't give you any real information anyway.
Right.
That's kind of the vibe I'm getting from our show.
That's the vibe I'm hoping people will take away. Yeah, because, we don't want anybody to be too certain about what we're doing here. That's the ultimate option. Or whatever option. What am I talking about? Ultimate, I don't know, operation. Maybe that's what I was trying to say.
Sure.
Whatever, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so it's good that we're talking about this today because I've also been listening to a biography of Napoleon, so this sort of works out.
Ooh.
Yeah.
You and your biographies. That's great.
Dude, yeah, I've been on a despot kick. So I did Lenin, I think, last week, and then I did Mao because I just have had a lot of time to listen to
Dude,
stuff.
how was Mao? That one must be crazy.
Mao was wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mao was crazy. I mean, he was so crazy. Stalin was like, "Yo, dude." I mean, according to this book, I was reading.
Yo, dude.
Yeah,
that is a bit much. Don't
well,
you?
yeah, because like apparently he wanted to go to war with the U.S. in like 1950. Because it was just an opportunity. The Korean War. Instead, they basically did the Korean War. But he's like, yeah, dude, it's fine if we get nuked. We'll lose half of our population, but it's fine. We've got more people. We'll make it through. It's just like, and Stalin was like, yo, chill, dude, chill. Yeah, and this is Stalin, right? So it wasn't exactly like super.
Yeah, when Stalin's telling you to chill.
Yeah. So gulag machine over there.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know. This is going to be weird. I've also got... Hang on, I got an idea though. I'm going to screw everything up.
Don't do that.
Be very careful.
Yeah.
My goodness. Okay.
My goodness.
I'm putting so I had the microphone on this metal thing, and I just put a cloth over it, and maybe that'll make it sound better. I don't know. We'll find out.
Nice.
Be less
like
trebly.
a windscreen. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, cool. No, I didn't put it over. It doesn't matter. Okay. I didn't put it over the mic itself. I put it over the metal thing. Anyway, who cares? Okay. But yeah, no, Mao was crazy. And Lenin was wild too. I mean, obviously. Lenin just seemed like he was just super angry at the world from living underground for a bunch of years. And then also, his brother was killed by the Tsar. Because, I mean, to be fair, his brother tried to kill the Tsar. And then
so
of that.
Sort of makes sense in a weird way.
Yeah, but like
not even a weird way,
right?
Like,
but that was like when he was like 17, so that you can imagine had an influence on him.
That'd be a funny defense. Like, I was 17, I didn't know any better. Sorry, I tried to kill you.
Oh no. Well, the brother was like 22 or something. I mean, still,
okay.
Well,
then he should. That he knew exactly.
He knew what he was doing. He was a man. No,
I actually just learned that there's a statue of Lenin in Seattle.
Really?
In downtown Seattle, which
those commies.
Well, was interesting. Well, it's funny because it doesn't actually surprise me that much, but my wife was like a little shocked by it.
I'm a little shocked, actually. I mean, I'm surprised. I mean, is it recent? Did they put it?
Well, I don't know when it went up, but the fact that I think it's in a city park, so it had to have been approved by government officials in the city, like city council or something like that, which is sort of funny to me.
Yeah, no, bunch of commies. Bunch of commies. You know, yeah, and it's the more, I mean, we sort of talked about this, but the more I learn about all this history, the more it does sort of feel like there was this communism versus capitalism thing is really just like the continental Europe versus the Anglosphere.
Sure.
You know, it's like communism was the response to the English Empire's, takeover via capitalism, which you could argue brought in the Industrial Revolution.
I'd be interested in. Yeah, maybe that could be true. I wonder what Curtis Yarvin would have to say about all that. I actually would be interested in doing an episode. He was just on what's that one? He was on trigonometry this last week, which was interesting to me because
really?
I consider him a little bit extreme for trigonometry. Trigonometry seems a little like kind of mainstream heterodox or something like that.
Yeah,
and Curtis Yarvin seems pretty far out there.
Yeah, he certainly is. I think his, whatever unqualified reservations, that was much more extreme. I honestly think he has tempered a bit. But no, I agree.
Yeah,
I mean,
maybe.
he's got some wild stuff in that blog that I definitely don't agree with. And I'm not convinced with his whole monarchy argument either.
Right.
Yeah, because it's like, people bring up like Napoleon as a benevolent dictator, but even he... even he was bad in a lot of ways. Like he clamped down on the freedom of the press and everything like that.
Right. I think it happens. I think the one thing Curtis Yarvin says that, or not the one thing that he says that makes sense to me is he says that you can have a good or bad democracy or a good or bad monarchy. It's not that you can't have good and bad versions of all these systems.
Right.
It's that the incentive structure is the best in a monarchy.
Well, and I think he's also making the point that, like, or I don't know if he's making this point, but this is sort of something I've thought about. Is like there is like a cycle to governments, and there's and it's like if a democracy goes down to tyranny, or I guess an oligarchy becomes an oligarchy, which seems to be like a natural progression, then the way to get rid of the oligarchy is for a monarchy to come in and then potentially reestablish a democracy, which you could argue like George Washington was an example of that or whatever.
No, it's true because you can see where that cycle goes because a monarch is going to become tyrannical, and who is going to defeat a monarch? The people. And then they're going to create a democracy, and then the monarch is then... Yeah, I can see that as sort of a perpetual cycle. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. You
and your waves, man.
Oh, well, everything's wave, man. No, but it does make sense because it's like I feel like when you think about things sort of more, I don't know, complicated. Like if you think the more complicated you get, the more you realize it's like if you want to actually, what am I trying to say here? Predict nature in a way, you need to. Nature isn't ever a straight line. It seems to be always like a lot of ebbs and flows. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like one system isn't going to work for the entirety of a government because the circumstances that the government exists in are going to change with time. So anyway, you've already said that. But yeah. Oh, God, articulation, man.
All right.
It's difficult.
Well, revolution.
Well, I was going to say the last thing before we get into that is it is interesting, though. It's like all of these despots came up during a period of anarchy. That was how they were able to come to rise.
Sure.
Because it's like the Revolution, the French Revolution, anarchy, right? And you had the Reign of Terror, and then that's people were so done with that they were like, yeah, Napoleon, just come here, man. You're doing great abroad. We trust you. Yeah, just take our rights and just get us on the right path.
Just take our rights.
But you could argue, like, honestly, like the French Revolution, I gotta be careful here. I don't want any French people to come after me. But in terms of like the height, England really kind of, I would say, came away from the Napoleonic Wars on top. And I would say, you could say England came on, the Anglosphere and with America, sort of as the New England, you could say, came on top in the 20th century. So it's the point is like when these despots come, it doesn't seem like in the case that Curtis Yarvin's making, although I imagine he wouldn't say that Stalin and Mao were perfect kings or monarchs. I hope he wouldn't say that. I don't think he would.
I don't think he would. Although he does say that dictator is essentially the modern term for monarch.
Exactly. No, and like Lenin too. But my point is, it's like all of these people, when they came to power, they basically made things worse, I would argue. And like Russia's own, I mean, whatever. Now we're getting into like modern politics, but obviously it seems like Russia's not doing too well, and it's been 100 years since their revolution, right? And China.
I mean, I think they're probably doing better now than they were doing
under the USSR.
80s.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And same with China, and that's why China had all their reforms after Mao with Deng Xiaoping. I can't pronounce Deng Xiaoping. I apologize. I'm just a gringo. Is that
right?
Is that
that's the ancient Chinese word for you.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, anyway. So okay, I'll stop ranting about that.
Yeah.
I just
because I have points back about anarchy, but we don't have to get into. We don't have to get back into anarchy. We should do anarchy at some point. Well, okay. I think that anarchy. I tend to think of it as sort of like meaning without leadership, basically. And so some forms of anarchy are highly chaotic, and some forms of anarchy are not necessarily chaotic. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, like, the Old West is kind of one of the bastions of examples of a highly anarchic system that actually works pretty well. Or Hong Kong, like in the 70s and 80s, was pretty anarcho-capitalist. So systems that need either very little leadership, centralized leadership, or none at all.
Or what about the Italian states in like the pre-Renaissance?
Right, exactly. So I think that it depends on what you're doing, and I think the toppling a government through violent means is probably going to lead often to chaotic anarchy that is going to drive people to seek what you're talking about, something like a monarchic leader. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or I mean, crises in general, like COVID or something like that. Mm-hmm. People seek top-down authority to tell them what to do. Right. Yeah, because they're scared. I mean, that's the thing, and then this is what anybody sort of that's in power probably understands is fear is the greatest motivator. Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's just a question of, with the idea that, like, some anarchy, it by definition doesn't lead to despots. That's essentially what you're saying, right? Right. Yeah. And we could talk about that at a different time. We could do the whole anarchist handbook, or 3 chapters out of it. Yeah, at some point. I'd be down. Yeah, I've never ever read that. Yeah, the black flag comes in all colors. Is that the anarchist flag? The black flag is the anarchist flag. Wait, so was Black Flag the band? Were they anarchists? Yes, definitely. Wow. It's all coming together, Antushka. Yeah. Oh, now it all makes sense. Yeah. Wait. Now that I think about their lyrics. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, yeah, no, but yeah, we can get into it. So we're talking about last chapter of Creations of Fire that we're going to discuss, right? Chapter 8. Yeah. Yep. And actually, I did, some pre-reading to, because pre-reading. Because they talk about phlogiston, so we do sort of need to, I feel like, define phlogiston. Yeah, I had to look that up. Actually, I didn't know what it was. Yeah, I think you did tell me briefly on a previous episode, but I forgot. Well, I did a bad job. All I said was essentially having to do with combustion, but we can talk about it a little bit more. But so we're chapter 8, Creations of Fire, and it was all about basically the 1700s, but really the latter part and the revolution of chemistry in France, because France really was sort of the bleeding edge of chemical thought at the end of the 18th century, which again sort of goes to show is like after the revolution, it's not that they weren't, it's not that French scientists weren't
innovating as much. But I would argue that it really sort of went over to the Germans in the 19th century in terms of a lot of the developments. But anyway, there was still a lot of great French scientists. So I'm not saying that as like, you know.
It's okay,
America,
French
though.
Scientists. You were good. Yeah.
No, dude, they're going to come after me, man. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that'd be funny.
Yeah, because obviously you have
French
Pasteur.
haters.
I mean, Pasteur is in the 19th
Right.
century. So, I mean, obviously you have good French.
Louis.
But yeah, so where to start? Where should we start? So maybe we could start with phlogiston, I guess.
Sure.
So basically,
what is?
Yeah, so phlogiston was this theory before, I guess, the oxygen theory or the idea of combustion, and it was supposed to try to explain how things combust and rust, which is what we call oxidation. Right. And so it was the idea that a substance that's going to combust has this element called phlogiston, and then when it combusts, it releases the phlogiston, and then that's what happens when it goes out. Is it's basically exhausted all the phlogiston.
It's like a physical element of combustion itself.
Right.
Like there's a combustion particle.
Right. So in that
kind
sense,
of what I was imagining.
It's sort of the inverse of what actually happens, where oxygen's actually being exhausted in the air, and then you have CO2 produced or whatever.
Right.
Well, not necessarily in the case of the combustion that happens within us, which is
organic,
oxidative respiration. That is, you bring in oxygen and you release carbon dioxide.
Right. But that's also what happens if you combust coal, right? You get carbon dioxide and water.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Or any organic.
Well, no, because it's any organic compound. Yes, I think so. Yeah, you're going to have some kind of carbonate. Byproduct.
I remember reading that it's a controversial opinion, but there's a chemist arguing that burning coal is actually the greenest of all things to burn. If you can coal or natural gas, because there are only two byproducts if you properly burn it and it's pure, which would be carbon dioxide and water.
Right.
And soot is the effect of unburned coal. That's like coal that has gotten into the air that you haven't actually burned up. So it's inefficient burning.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, and then all the impurities too. I mean,
right.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess I could see that. And then obviously, there's a whole carbon cycle,
Right.
And but yeah, so I mean, and this was actually, I didn't realize it wasn't actually that around for that long. I mean, it was basically put forth by this German guy in like 1667, Johann Joachim Becker.
Becker.
But it became sort of the predominant theory in the 18th century to explain combustion until the French, led mostly by Lavoisier, who ultimately got beheaded in the Revolution. I shouldn't laugh, but the guy did. He wasn't. Oh yeah, and we can talk about that later. But he basically realized that it's actually oxygen, and that's being used.
But he still clung to these particles things because he thought there was a heat particle.
Yeah. Well, and you see that
heat element.
No, I mean you see that a lot though, because I feel like you see it now. Whereas you don't want to ever stray too far away from the dogma because it's going to be just harder to make your case. You almost need to piecemeal. I guess I just wonder about this kind of stuff. How much when people publish, they're also trying to throw some bones to their opponents. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense. But he probably did actually believe it, but.
The phlogiston reminds me of what I've read about the idea of ether with physics.
Right.
That the universe is not a vacuum, but it's actually populated by a substance.
Yeah, it is the sort of same idea that.
Right.
I agree.
I mean, it makes sense, I guess. All this stuff sort of makes sense to me and doesn't.
Right. Well, and that is the interesting thing about modern science is there are so much of it is like relativity. You have to sort of it's not as obvious as like gravity, right? You know, as classical mechanics, and I think that was probably another reason it sort of took people a long time, because it's a lot easier when you have a unrefined system to study these things as they did. I mean, that's another reason I like this book, is sort of reading how they actually did these experiments. I mean, they had to be very
cool.
clever, and like the way that Lavoisier did it, and we should give credit to the guy. They basically made the first calorimeter.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah, Lavoisier and Laplace, Laplace, who's the famous mathematician.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, this is just very cool. And so they measured the amount of heat that was. I mean, I almost want to just read this because I think it's just very.
Do it.
So it's. Where to start? So the device consisted of a chamber surrounded by an ice-packed jacket. The amount of water collected from melted ice was used to measure the heat evolved in the inner chamber. To improve the accuracy of the measurement, the whole device was insulated with another ice-pack jacket, and experiments were performed only on the days when the outside temperature was a few degrees above freezing. So basically, they're just trying to do this because they need a way to measure heat. And so you can do that by measuring the amount of water that gets sort of melted.
Right.
So with this device, they measured the amount of heat that evolved from the combustion of charcoal to form carbon dioxide. They then measured the amount of heat generated by a guinea pig while collecting the carbon dioxide the animal exhaled. They compared the amount of heat generated by the animal with the amount of heat generated by combustion to produce the same amount of carbon dioxide. And yeah. Wait a minute, am I wrong? Yeah, the amount of water collected from melted ice was used to measure the heat evolved in the inner chamber. So yeah. I just think that's really clever. I said that, right? Yeah, I said that.
Yes, okay. I think it's clever. I think the other cool thing that this chapter brings up, too, is that a lot of people were doing similar experiments, and another sort of key to the puzzle is your different people's ability to properly interpret the results.
Exactly. Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, interpretation is such a difficult thing. and like,
right.
You know, I'm at this conference now and sitting and the really sort of clever talks are the ones that sort of come up with really novel ways of sort of interpreting it. And not to, I mean, when you say that, it almost sounds like you're manipulating, but it's not that. It's like you shift your frame almost.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, which is essentially what Einstein did too. It's like, oh, well.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. It's like, you know, everything's relative, man.
The one thing I think while reading the whole chapter is that there's all these theories that last some of them last for hundreds of years. And it's usually because they make a certain amount of sense.
Right.
Like, you can kind of see why people believe these theories that have since been disproven. And so I always wonder what things now, it's so hard to see while you're in it, but there's probably tons of things now that make perfect sense to us and are actually wrong. Or they may or may not be wrong, but some other theory will take over at some point.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing, is it also strikes me as possible that things that have fallen out of favor, those ones might have actually been the right way.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, this is why it's like the only... I mean, it's like time is a big thing you need to sort of get at truth, is you just... Time which allows for the accumulation of evidence.
Right. Well, because it said that the theory of phlogiston was powerful also because it was pretty good. It had good predictive power.
Right.
So it was a pretty good model.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. So I thought that was kind of interesting that Lavoisier, because another interesting thing that I found was that it was still like a gentleman's pursuit to be a chemist. You had to fund it yourself somehow.
Yeah.
And that's essentially why Lavoisier got himself in trouble with the what was it, the public of the Committee of Public Safety. I think that's what the
oh my gosh,
that's what it was called.
I love that title. That sounds like something you'd have to go to now to get your driver's license.
I know.
It's great.
And that's why he got guillotined by them during the Reign of Terror, because he basically funded his efforts by becoming a tax collector.
Right. Oh, also that system was crazy. I didn't know about that, where the king levied a tax but didn't collect it himself. He hired these private companies that collected taxes, and then they could actually set the number at whatever they want, take their cut.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Well, you sort of have. Yeah. Well, you don't have the same thing now, but yeah, it's.
I mean, I guess the closest thing you
people-
have now is like TurboTax charges you to use their system.
Well, and
then they deliver your tax, but they're also providing you a service.
Right. Well, it's more of just like the more middle people you get in, the more
Right.
ability for there to be manipulation and stuff like
Yes.
that. No, but I agree.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that either. I thought that was kind of interesting too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I'm talking a lot. Any other? Well, obviously there's more stuff, but what are you thinking?
Well, so I didn't have any big bones to pick with this chapter. The big takeaway that I got after reading it was just thinking about Lavoisier, and he's sort of framed as kind of an asshole, but really smart, really clever, like you were saying, clever experiments, good with interpretation, very sort of logical and clear thinking. And so tying it back to some of the other stuff we read about Galen and Vesalius and stuff like that, it makes me think about we've talked about this before, but where the right place to land yourself is in terms of speaking what you believe to be true, just like pressing it forward at all costs, or giving people things, cutting people a break. Because the one thing that was sort of interesting was when his 3 disciples were sort of coming up, the way I was describing them, I was sort of imagining kind of like graduate students presenting papers to him or something like that, and he wouldn't sign off on the papers. I mean, I think that's sort of a modern way of framing it, but he wouldn't sign off on their work, put his name on it as their sort of headmaster or something like that, until they fully accepted his theory. So it was an interesting way of approaching the situation.
Yeah. Well,
saying like I'm right, and I will not budge on that one inch.
Right. Yeah, and I mean it's always that question is how do you know that you're right? And I guess it's just certain people you realize it,
Right.
He had obviously experimental evidence to back it up. But before that, I mean, he was going off of a hunch and still they talk about that a lot, about how sort of sure he was. And I think the chapter actually even ends with that, which is maybe what you're getting at, is how, there is a bit of also egotism that is sort of required to just be like, guys, everybody else is wrong and I'm right.
But is right, of course. That's what I'm wondering is that a good thing? Is that a really good thing? Is it a crappy thing? Because, when we think of, if I think of somebody like Christopher Hitchens or something, I don't know if you ever got into him at all.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, just like uncompromising,
right,
in a way that's very compelling. Like I love listening to Christopher Hitchens for that reason.
Right.
And he's discussing religion, and so the idea of it being right or wrong is a little bit more difficult to pin down. But
and you could say, in some ways, I think that's why Curtis Yarvin's so entertaining to listen to, is because even though you're like, dude, I feel like you're so off on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
You're like, he's so confident that he's right, And
the other great thing about saying things really confidently like that is it gives you something to push against. Because if somebody makes a claim that's complete and direct, monarchy is superior to democracy or something like what Curtis Yarvin says.
Right.
There's a statement that you can push on and you can test, and it's actually sort of easy.
Yeah.
They're making it easier to have a conversation with them versus somebody being wishy-washy.
That's true. That's true, because then you at least know where they are, and so you can sort of start to establish things. And
I guess it can make it difficult if you are offended. I mean, one of the great things that Christopher Hitchens always used to say is if somebody says they're offended, his response is basically, so what? Like, why would I care about your offense?
Right.
That's the most boring thing you could possibly say.
And it is true. It's like nothing sort of gets done without debate. That's the other big thing, is you sort of have to be... I mean, this is something I've sort of having to get, surprisingly in some ways, getting more used to, is
Right.
You have to be able to fight for your ideas in some sense if you want to make it in science. As you need to be ready to fight because I mean, even if you're right, people are going to probably tell you you're wrong, and you have to have a thick skin. I completely agree. Yeah, Hitchens is R.I.P. man. I mean, I've probably watched every YouTube clip of him, just listening to him rant.
Hitch slaps.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it's just, again, it's not that I agree with everything that he says, but it's his. He's also just a master rhetorician, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Yep. So he's just very, like we're saying, very entertaining to just listen to, and you can learn a lot from how he talks too. Like the book sort of the chapter ends with that. I think, Lavoisier's success may have had another more subtle source. Lavoisier was not a humble man, as we're talking about. He was at times annoyingly arrogant, but then he was born to a privileged class, wealthy nearly to the point of independence, married a beautiful, devoted woman, and so there was little in his life to convince him that he should be otherwise. So that's also very interesting.
But should he have been? I mean, like this is basically my question. I guess using the word humble is good. Should you be humble, and why?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, yes, I think so. But honestly, it's like, what have I done?
But then it feels to me like that's our weird our Puritan background or something. Why should we be humble? Because that's a good thing to do, or the Bible says so. I do wonder, why should we be humble? And to me, the answer is sort of like because it makes other people feel bad if you're not.
I think you should be humble because it's like the limit of not being humble is sort of thinking that you're God, I think. And it goes back to what the issue is that we're talking about. That was what all these despots thought, is they were like, we have divine. I mean, this is the divine right of kings, right?
Right.
I mean, yeah. So that's why, in my opinion.
That's interesting. Well, it's interesting that you say that you bring it to God like that, because my thought of being humble, I related to religion, and then you say thinking that your God is the reason to be humble is to fight against that. Yeah. That tendency. I listened to a rabbi once who was debating Richard Dawkins, because Richard Dawkins was saying that the Ten Commandments are useless and sort of meaningless. You don't need them.
Was this Rabbi Shmuley?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. But the first commandment is you shall have no other gods before me, right? Which, from the atheist perspective, is a crazy commandment. Why is the very first rule in the whole universe that there's only one God and you shall have no other gods, kind of a thing? And the rabbi was saying that first commandment is the commandment to be humble. That is the sort of the traditional Jewish interpretation of that. Not that it matters whether or not you believe in other gods, but that you treat the universe with the reverence of you are just you,
right,
and you are not God.
Right. Yeah, and that's why, I mean, that's essentially why I went to the God stuff when we were talking about this, because I agree completely with that. And, Christians, I think it's the same view.
Right.
Yeah, and I do think that's actually something good to keep in mind for the reasons that I've already said. Is like, I do think if you think that you're God, then what is to stop you from being like, well, I can do anything I want because I'm God,
right?
So
this brings us to postmodernism, because I think that where truth comes from in postmodernism is it comes from you.
Yeah.
Which is sort of saying that you're God in a weird way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, see, this getting back to, like, I guess I'm trying to think of a better phrase of this, thinking complicatedly, or like not trying to simplify things down too much, and trying to fit every circumstance with the same model, and having a model that can change depending on what it is. Because it's like, I think it's good to sort of navigate that spectrum. I think it's good to be humble sometimes, and I think it's good not to be godlike, but to like stray to I guess if you have that on the right end of the spectrum, to stray there a little bit.
Right.
When you feel like you are on to something and everybody else is wrong, but then you know, if you get to the point where you're like starting to think that, well, what are all these other people good for anyway? You know, they're just getting in my way. Then you maybe want to like switch back and go to the left side of the distribution.
Sure.
You know, and it's like, this is the problem, is I just feel like we have this issue as humans where we just want we want to like get a solution, and then we just want to do that for the rest of our lives. You know, it's just repeat. Right. But it's like life is constantly shifting. You're constantly having to adapt if you want to survive. And I think part of that adaptation comes in being able to like, change your mindset and be humble sometimes and be arrogant, dare I say, others. When you have a well-deserving reason to be arrogant, and this gets back to something we've already sort of talked about, is like, well, then, so what's your measure of being arrogant?
How do you know?
Yeah, how do you know when to be arrogant? And this is where I think science is helpful if you're interpreting it correctly. That is the time, because then you have data, and that's the time I feel the most, I guess, comfortable to push back, is like if I have empirical evidence, then I'm, And that is how, I mean, and this is why I think empiricism did sort of take down religion in some sense.
True.
You know?
The interpretation thing is tricky there, though, because two people could look at the same data set and come to wildly different conclusions about what it means.
Yes. Yeah.
And then how do you know who's right? I don't know. You could test
it's more people,
reproducibility.
Exactly.
You could test its predictive power. I mean, you can keep going.
We keep coming back to that point of that I think I still feel that truth is reproducibility. And so the more people that are able to reproduce a result, then you can be more confident that result's true. So it's like if you have two people that have the same result, then you need to get independent people to do the experiments, as they did in the book too. I mean, other people started to do it. Did you have any other thoughts on that? Because I actually had a sort of another thought on the chapter.
Go for it.
I also, like, another reason I like this chapter a lot, because this is maybe my favorite chapter from the book, is it's also showing sort of how people did experiments before you had all the fancy equipment that we had. And like that we already talked about the calorimeter, but also just the idea of just like making a vacuum in like a glass tube, you know, like that was sort of new technology back then. And that was essentially how they were able to start to isolate these invisible gases, which is just, I mean, that was actually one of the reasons I got this book back in the day, because I've always been just like, how do we know that this exists if we can't see it, especially before you had mass spectrometry or whatever, you know, to actually like pulverize things into their constituents, or electron microscopy to look at things at high resolution, X-ray crystallography, et cetera. I mean, you just had to be really smart, and one of the ways to do it was vacuum technology, you know. So thought that was cool.
Yeah, it's funny that it's so much. Is it deductive reasoning? Is that the right word?
I always get those confused. I think
it's where they surmise something must be true because of a certain result. Not lose like the conservation of mass or something like that.
No, so deductive is from general to specific conclusions. I think inductive is from like evidence.
Sure. Well, like the idea that, you know, you transform water into gas or into water vapor. You evaporate water, but there's no mass lost, and so you must not have lost any substance. Right.
Yeah, that I was thinking of that as more of like it's like elimination and stuff like that. You're just like logical elimination. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know what there is a term, and I'm just being stupid. But like I think what they're doing is inductive reasoning. Is you're going from specific examples and you're sort of going out and making a general theory.
What's interesting is actually I think we still do that a lot. We've talked about it before about, you know, if you're being tested for some disease, it's not usually the test is not usually somebody taking a microscope and looking to see if you have little like Ebola particles in your blood. there's some immune response reaction that they're looking for that suggests that you do have that disease.
Yeah, or like heart attack, you're measuring, byproducts that were sort of produced from the anoxygenic insult.
You're coming to a conclusion based on sort of what's the word?
Secondary stuff.
Yeah, sure, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was gonna say elimination and addition is sort of the way that they're doing it. It's like you take stuff away slowly to get at it, and then you put stuff back, and that's how you sort of can get at. And it's the same thing that we do in math. Is like to figure out, like I'm thinking of equation, finding like the hidden variable or unknown variables in like 3 equations and having 2 unknowns and stuff like that, and just doing substitution and stuff like that. I don't know. Anyway, what the hell am I talking about anymore? I don't even know. Yeah. Oh, another thing I like about this chapter is it's talking about how the lectures worked, and this sort of goes. It's it was different because back in the day you would like pay for specific lectures, and but it's similar in the sense that it's like the lecturers that were the best would have all the students go to it. So anyway, that was also kind of funny,
right?
Or just nothing changes.
I have a technical question on combustion.
Oh yeah.
So what is combustion? Because it's not, because the way it's being described, combustion as respiration or reduction, was that all? Because it's funny. Is combustion just like the oxidization of something, or oxygen leaving something? Oxygen being separated from something.
Yeah, so it is. So it's specific for chemistry. I just looked it up for a good definition.
Nice. Okay.
So rapid chemical combination of a substance with oxygen involving the production of heat and light.
So how is respiration combustion? Does that create light?
Maybe very small amounts, but it does create heat because if you dislocate the electron transfer chain, which we have proteins to do that in our adipose tissue, our brown adipose tissue, that'll make heat, which is why, if
Does heat always make light? Are heat and light separable?
Yeah, Cole, so heat is energy.
Right.
So
what is light?
Yeah, and so energy, a light has energy.
Right.
So combustion, like respiration is combustion, because what I was saying is you're using oxygen and you're, you are creating water, actually.
I understand that.
And you're creating heat, but you're combining oxygen with hydrogen, and you're making water, and you're also breaking down to get the electrons needed, or rather the reductive species to receive electrons. You are breaking down carbonated things like glucose and et cetera. So it is complicated, but in a very simple sense, yes, you're sort of combining things with oxygen, which is what this definition is.
Right. So is oxidization also combustion? Like if copper oxidizes or something like that, or something rusts?
Yes. Yeah. Which is why essentially when Lavoisier was discovering this, he was also discovering oxidation.
Right. But does that create heat and light?
I
guess I'm wondering what the distinction between oxidation and combustion is, if there is a distinction.
Well, so oxidation is a more general term. You can have oxygen.
Okay.
This is actually one of the very confusing things in chemistry.
I'm always bad at chemistry. Confuses me so much. That was my worst science class.
Oh yeah. That was actually one of my best, but you're asking me questions that I haven't thought about in a long time, so I'm just trying to organize myself. So we term oxidation and reduction like they are because the first sort of examples of this was with oxygen and what we're sort of talking about. But
Right.
really, it's just you're talking about the transfer of electrons. That's, and so that can happen between any elements. So oxidation is the loss of electrons, or you can think of it as an increase in the oxidative state, and then reduction's gaining electrons. So in an oxidative reduction reaction, which is
The loss of electrons, it's not the gaining of oxygen molecules.
Yes. It's the electrons are the important point here, and so
I see.
Yes, and
Okay.
yeah, because so oxygen becomes less so O2, which is the oxygen in the air, it's got 2 more electrons to give to other things basically, and then when you combine
so
it,
it's slightly radioactive.
when you combine it with hydrogen, as you're doing in the in the combustion examples to make water, you're actually you're allowing those paired electrons to bind with something, so it's becoming.
I see.
Yeah, so you're sort of giving those electrons to the hydrogen, which that's how the transfer of electrons. You're making a bond because hydrogen, is relatively electron poor. Oxygen's electron rich in this case, and then you can combine them to make water. And so again, that's just a very sort of specific example of oxidative reduction. But you can have
Is that combustion?
That's combustion. Yes, what we just talked about. Yeah, is this?
I think I
making
probably
any
need
sense?
to look into this. No, it's making sense. I feel like I still don't see what the difference. Like what is combustion? Because like the heat and light to me is my idea of combustion. Like something burning or an explosion or something like that. And the idea of like a mini explosion that you don't perceive also makes sense to me. But these don't all necessarily seem. It seems to me that the process of just O2 combining with a hydrogen molecule to create water, if that is combustion, then like tons more things are combustion than I thought were combustion. Right. Well, so NASA says combustion is a chemical process in which a substance reacts rapidly with oxygen and gives off heat.
Yeah. So I think, again, it's like it depends on who you ask. If you ask like a chemist, they're probably going to say it's a general exothermic redox reaction. Like it's just you have some reductant and some oxidant, and there's a transfer of electrons occurring, and there's a production of heat.
Right.
That's, I think, the sort of most basic definition of it. And yeah, I don't know how fun it'll be to sort of go into the details.
We should keep going. Keep going.
But it's it's just I mean, when you think about what the atoms that are being used are, is that you've got oxygen and you've got carbon and hydrogen, and they're sort of reforming, and that's why you'll get sort of water and carbon dioxide, because carbon dioxide is carbon with 2 oxygens, and water is 1 oxygen with 2 hydrogens, right? So
right. I get that. I'm stuck on the where is the combustion in the system, but I think I should just look into it.
What do how are you still confused, I guess?
I don't know.
Wait, no, sorry. Because didn't we say it? It's just a general. It's just a general reaction where you have a transfer of electrons and heat's being produced. What's confusing? How is that not clear, Antushka?
That's a hilarious question. Why are you an idiot?
Sorry, that was harsh.
No,
I apologize.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I'm not offended at all. I just think it's funny.
I feel like we've said it multiple times, so I don't know. I don't know where to go with it.
I'm sure you have.
What are you still confused about? I don't know. Sorry, I'm going to cut this out. I sound like
No, don't cut it out. It's great. I love it. The whole thing.
Sorry, Antushka. I'm coming off harsh. I apologize.
It's fine. We just talked about this. You shouldn't apologize for that.
No, it's I'm going to listen back to this and be like, dude, I'm a a floundering idiot when I'm trying to explain this too. Because honestly, it's like
maybe you'll think he's an idiot or I'm an idiot.
yeah.
Okay,
Well,
the combustion of hydrogen gas produces water vapor.
Yeah. No, but but I mean, these are good questions. I mean, this is unfortunately like the last time I took this kind of stuff was in like college chemistry, which was like 10 years ago now. So I'm a little rusty with all this, but I always really liked chemistry and I was good at it. I think if I could have gone back, I would have done chemistry.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing is I was bad at it, and so I think it's all coming clear right now.
Oh, that's good. Well, and this is also the thing though, is it's like that was always really confusing to me. It's like, why are we calling it reduction and oxidation if you're not always having oxygen? But I think it's just a historic thing because it was discovered with oxygen, and it's just it stuck with that.
Right.
Yeah. God. Yeah. You ask good questions, Antushka.
I don't think it's a good question.
I think it was.
I think it's a really stupid.
No,
I think this is exactly
honestly,
the same thing that used to happen to me in chemistry. It's like I'm stuck because I don't understand some basic thing, and they're like, "Oh, it's the same as this other thing," and then it's like, "Well, is it the same in all circumstances?" And then there's like, "Oh, no, that's not the same," and then I'm confused because I thought they just said it was the same.
Well, it's if you just think of it as electrons are being transferred, I think that's the way to think about it.
Well, I understand that idea.
Yeah. Yeah, because this is where rust comes in and everything like that. I mean, that's why they were trying to explain phlogiston, because they thought, like, you know, as something is sitting in the air. Yeah, actually, I don't know. I didn't really understand that. I don't know if they talked about that, though.
I don't know.
The rust thing, for how rust works into the phlogiston theory, but, you know, who cares? We don't have to go back into that. But rust is an oxidation reductive process that's occurring.
Right.
Yeah.
I do remember that from chemistry class.
About rust?
I feel like I remember that was like, yeah.
Yeah. Did you take chemistry in college?
I did.
Okay.
I took chemistry, but I took it before I got.
Oh, did you take it at
Yeah, I guess we have to bleep both those places out, huh?
Well, we didn't in the last place. I mean,
well, that makes it better.
Yeah, it does.
You don't
we
have to
are like kind of inconsistent because I think I might have said your name in like the first episode, and I don't think I bleeped it out.
Okay. All right. So what else on this chapter? What are my notes here?
What else from the chapter? Sorry, now you got me looking at the iron oxygen oxidation stuff like that. Yeah, no, the redox was one of the most. So I should say you shouldn't feel dumb because redox is one of the more difficult things for in the chemistry classes. Like I feel like this is something that everybody struggles with because it is weird to think about, you know. So don't feel bad, Antushka. And look at me. It's like I've also forgotten a lot of this stuff. So, and I should probably know this stuff. It's like, you know, so yeah. Anyway, okay, yeah, we can move on though. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, what else to talk about?
I have some things highlighted, but I should have made notes next to all my highlights.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was interesting when they were talking about Aristotle's old idea of it being necessary for abundantly, or it also being necessary for some kind of basic element to be abundantly distributed in nature and enter as an essential and constituent principle in the composition of a great number of bodies. It's an interesting idea that for something to be classified and maintain a status as some kind of fundamental element, it needs to be found everywhere. It needs to be really common. Because to me, it makes perfect sense that there would be some more common and some less common fundamental elements. In the same way that there's probably a lot more blades of grass than there are bees. Like, that's a normal thing in nature, that there's more of some things and fewer of other things.
But I feel like you're getting... It's hard to compare those because they're different scales. I don't know.
Sure.
Because, like, ultimately, what is in both of those? Carbon, right? And then you can break that down. And so in that sense, there is a very abundant material that's prevalent in both of them. So I guess what I'm saying is I kind of agree with that sentiment.
It's true, but how... Well... But Lavoisier was saying that's wrong. That was like a huge. Well,
Lavoisier wasn't right about everything.
Well, but what they're saying is that's a huge deviation. That was a big improvement on Aristotle's idea, because Aristotle rejected the thought of anything being a fundamental element that wasn't found everywhere. And today there are fundamental elements. There's things on the periodic table that are not very common, and there's things on the periodic table that are super common.
Well, it's difficult.
Like, there's not a whole lot of, like, Einsteinium out there.
Right, but every one of those has protons, neutrons, and electrons. And
there's a whole lot of protons, neutrons, and electrons.
This is what I'm getting at, though, is, like, it just depends on how you define it, whereas, like, this is where I would maybe disagree with the author's interpretation of this. Because it's like, yes, while we aren't looking at, whatever, fire, earth, air, and water as the fundamental elements, we are just changing our definitions of what fundamental elements are. I think we still do think there are, if you want to, maybe we don't call them elements, but that's essentially, I think, what physicists or particle physicists are trying to do when they're looking for the building blocks. All Aristotle was talking about was building blocks. He just was wrong about the building blocks.
Right.
That's how I interpret it, at least. I don't know.
I see.
And it gets back to what we were talking about 2 or 3, whatever, it was the last episode or something, about that idea of the Greeks, because like the Greeks also had a lot of different theories about, Democritus, he had the atom theory, and then Aristotle's, or Empedocles, I think, was technically the person that came up with the heat or the 4-element theory. But was popularized by Aristotle. And let's be honest, more so Alexander the Great. I mean, if it weren't for him, nobody would know who Aristotle was.
Of course,
He Hellenized the world, damn it. Anyway, I don't know what I always get myself... I get myself into these tangents, and then I lose my train.
It's great, though.
Yeah, is it?
I like it.
I'm a doddering idiot. Doddering? I don't know.
That's how I'd say it.
That's how you would say it, yeah. But yeah, I guess I just think we just are thinking about fundamental natures differently, and that was kind of a point I was trying to make at a previous episode, where I think the author was again trying to say, like, oh yeah, we don't really think of it like this anymore, as people aren't still trying to find a fundamental element, but I think we are. And whether it's 4 or I think actually many people think it might be 1. I kind of think it might be 1 or 2, but maybe it is 4, and we just haven't gone deep enough, or it's a simulation. But even the simulation's got to have some physical grounding in, Tushka.
Does it?
I don't know.
That to me feels like a religious statement.
What a. That's funny.
If it's 1, if it's 1, if it all boils down to 1, is that God? Is that the same thing?
Might be.
You shall have only one God before me, and that is the substrate of the universe.
Can God microwave a burrito?
Are you religious?
Can God microwave a burrito bigger than the universe?
Obviously.
You think so?
Yeah.
What about bigger than God? Okay.
Yeah, but he probably can, but why would you want to?
It's a good question. I don't know. I don't know.
It's a stupid idea. It's a stupid idea. Why would God want a burrito bigger than him?
Yeah, he was hungry after making the world, or the universe,
Yeah, maybe.
On the 7th day, God made a huge burrito.
A huge burrito.
Okay.
All right.
I'm not done here.
Okay.
Sorry, no, I should be done. I'm done soon. Another sort of point I want to make. I thought it was funny, and this goes back against how, like, you can look at history, at least European history, certainly as, certainly a struggle between the French and English, but I sort of think more generally as the continental Europeans and the English, but
Sure.
you know, maybe
Yeah.
English and Dutch. You can throw the Dutch in there too, because they were the water powers and whatnot. But
Right.
yeah, I just thought it was funny. It's like it said. It's talking about how the French Academy of Sciences was created in 1666. I was like, oh, wait a minute. Wasn't the Royal Society in England around then? And sure enough, the Royal Society was in 1660, which was the English one. So that's exactly that, you know, oh, you guys are going to make a society? Well, we're going to make a society. So I just thought that was funny.
Yeah.
And I think that was everything that I wanted to talk about.
Well, then.
Yeah. So are we going on to Foucault?
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh boy.
So the book is organized a little weird.
One last part. Sorry.
Yes,
I just thought
it,
this
do
was
it.
also like crazy. When it was talking about Fourcroy, who was one of the like Lavoisieites or whatever, and how he was investigating the effect of injecting putrefied blood into animals.
Ugh, yeah.
And there was a theory that at the time that scurvy was caused by blood putrefying in the veins.
Right.
So a few things are interesting. For one, that's a callback to what we were saying, how, yeah, it's like people have been sort of, we have a lot of scientific knowledge, and we should be very thankful to animals because we've learned a lot from sort of doing ridiculous experiments. More so historically, I think, again, I do think we're more humane now. But and I know you think humane is a funny word. We won't get into that again. And then also, I found it interesting because it's like, so Fourcroy was doing this stuff around the end of the 18th century, and I'm pretty sure the first clinical trial was done, like first, published clinical trial, I should say, was done in England in like the 1750s or maybe or thereabouts. I don't remember the exact date this time. I'm sorry, Antushka. To actually get at what was causing scurvy, and they did a controlled trial giving some people vitamin C or oranges or whatever, and some not. And so it's just interesting. So they obviously weren't reading that literature, and which makes sense because it was in English. And but it's also interesting going to show how the English were kind of already a step ahead of everybody else empirically. In my opinion.
Sure. That's interesting. Yeah. I think it's also mildly funny. I understand that they're looking for something like the cause of scurvy, but what are the effects of injecting putrefied blood? And it's like, oh, they died? Oh, weird.
I know.
Like, who would have thought?
Yeah. I know.
It kind of, there's an American Dad episode that's Francine's in the kitchen and she's putting chocolate sauce in the back of a fan and then it sprays all over the kitchen. She's in a lab coat with a clipboard. She's like, just as I thought.
Yeah. Oh, how are you going to know if you don't do the experiment, Antushka?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. So we're talking about Foucault.
Foucault, Madness and Civilization. It's set up a little bit funny, so doing it by chapter. It does kind of have sections, but it's all laid out in like paragraphs that are numbered or like groupings of paragraphs that are numbered. So maybe we should just do sort of a number to a number. Do you see that?
Sorry, I'm trying to pull it up.
Okay.
I will in 2
All right,
seconds.
so Michel Foucault, Madness and Civilization.
Yep. Okay, I've got it now.
All right. So if you go a few pages in, past the preface, there's the contents, the table of contents. And then you have the first, which is, I don't even know how to pronounce that, Stultifera Navis. And then the Great Confinement and the Insane, Passion and Delirium, Aspects of Madness, Doctors and Patients, The Great Fear, New Division, and the Birth of the Asylum. And the conclusion.
Yeah. I mean, this is all very, very good. Why is this taking so long to open? I'm sorry.
No. It's okay.
You sent me an EPUB? Maybe that's why.
I did.
What is this file type?
You open it with Books, your Books app. I can send you a PDF if you'd prefer.
No, it's fine. That's why it was taking so long because I have to update my library because I never use this.
I use it so that I can share it between my iPad and my computer.
Oh, yeah.
And then the notes transfer and everything.
Okay. finally, I think, geez, okay, this is, sorry. Okay, go to the contents. This is great radio.
Yeah, it's really good. Okay, so what I propose is we actually just start at the beginning.
Okay.
Because it starts.
Yeah, how long is this?
It's not super long. We probably won't get through the whole thing, but we start at the beginning at number 1.
That's kind of long. It's 500 pages. That's kind of long.
Wait a minute. Yeah, but they're short pages if you're opening it on a computer.
Oh, yeah.
It's not. It's like 200 and something pages. Anyway, so it's kind of long. It's 500 pages.
And Tushka is like, what, can you not read?
So the first section, if you go,
I'm not seeing the contents either, but it's fine.
Just keep going. Keep going through the preface
and past the intro. This is
all right. If you're on a computer, go to page 30.
30. Okay, good, cool.
All right, and then keep going, just so you can see what I'm talking about. Go to page 33.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have our first section, then we have a bracketed 3 for our next section. And
no,
4.
Ours are different for some reason. I don't know why it's different, but that's not what I'm seeing. But it's fine. I honestly think you should just choose what we do, and then I'll
okay. So let's start at number 1, and let's read the first section all the way until 38. So the first 38 little mini sections. They're short. They're like a couple paragraphs each.
Okay.
So from Stultifera Navis to the Great Confinement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes, it does. And I'm seeing contents now. Yeah.
Nice.
Could it just make a regular book? No, I guess it's probably because I'm... I already hate him.
That's great.
I'm just kidding.
Oh,
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, hey, we had to read a book in critical studies in grad school. We were doing critical theory and music, and bell hooks doesn't use punctuation or capital letters. Sometimes she uses some punctuation, but no capital letters, which actually makes it significantly harder to read.
Yeah, I imagine it would. It's like, there are reasons that these things were implemented.
Oh, man, the way you said that was so funny.
It wasn't all the patriarchy. Or it wasn't all, how about this? Maybe it was the patriarchy, but it wasn't all, trying to make everybody's lives horrible.
No, that's it. That's it. That's the thing. Yeah. Of all the stuff you said, that's the...
I've just, yeah. I'll take it out. Don't worry. And we're back.
Oh, man, our whole show will just be like, and we're back over and over again.
Yeah.
And we're back.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, to the confinement, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And so not reading the intro and the preface.
No.
Specifically.
Yeah,
but
don't read them. No, don't read them. Don't read them.
Don't read them. Okay.
Whatever you do, don't read those.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Now this will be so. What are we? Just to give a primer. What are we navigating into? So we've shifted from chemistry, history.
Yes.
And so now we're going into.
All right. So Foucault. So this is essentially. I mean, it's similar to the critical theories. It is taking a critical eye to. Things that are assumed status quos in society and the horrors that can befall people because of that. So Foucault in this book is taking on the idea of madness and the actions that have been taken against people throughout the history of the West because of the definition of madness.
Okay. So we'll have to read Carlyle's Latter-day pamphlet after this.
Sure. Yeah, we can read it.
It'll be the complete opposite of this. Which, by the way, I don't agree with.
Okay, good. Wait. Carlyle's. I actually don't know what that is. What?
Yeah, he is. I mean, it's what's his name? Yarvin. I mean, Yarvin loves Carlyle.
Oh yes, yes. I know.
Yeah. But he basically was. He wrote in the 1850s after the big 1848. At least this Latter-day pamphlets after the 1848 revolutions, in Europe because, and the fall of all the monarchies, essentially, or like the French monarchy certainly, and then you had the famine in Ireland,
right,
and all this stuff, and of course America was this new thing, and so he was basically making the monarch. He was like the Curtis Yarvin of the time in some sense. He was like making a play of why we need kings and queens and monarchy and why basically anyway it's the complete opposite of Foucault.
Nice.
Which then goes back to what I'm saying is, what do you know? Carlyle's English and Foucault is French. What do you know?
Oh, yeah, maybe we're gonna discover that's really all there's just those two camps and they're just always opposed.
Well, and it's like, where did Engel and I mean, granted, Engel and Marx were in England for a bit, but I think they spent a lot of time in Paris too.
Probably.
And obviously they're German, and obviously. Yeah. So anyway, but what is communism but sort of the dialectic response to capitalism, right? He loved Hegel, right?
Right.
Anyway, okay, yeah.
I like it.
No, this will be good.
Yeah.
I think this will be good. Yeah.
Cool.
I
think it'll be
cut out the. Yeah.
It'll be a little confusing, but if we read it in small chunks, I think it'll be all right.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and we'll obviously have to cut out like the entire episode.
It's just one long bleep.
Episode. Yeah.
Like it's been bleeping for 10 minutes straight.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, just wait till we read the Unabomber manifesto.
Dude. Yeah, have you read that? I've never read that.
Yeah, I have it. I've read about half of it.
Yeah, he was just he was like anti-industry and everything, right? He wanted to go back to the land and everything, right?
It was that. It's also anti-liberalism, anti-left-wing politics. I mean, he was very angry.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I got from Lenin, too. I mean, it's just you read it, what he wrote, too, and you could just hear the anger. And was that you saying that, too? I feel like you said that. You, read some of him. But also,
oh, yeah. I mean, in the
just books.
Wildly brutal quotes from him.
Yes.
Shocking because that isn't really... What I find interesting about people like Lenin, and we talked about this with Roosevelt a little bit, is the way that history remembers them is a little bit surprising once you read about them.
Right.
Because I feel like Lenin he's not really hated. He's not like the modern association with Lenin is like, oh, he was like leading this revolution and he was trying to do this great thing. And Stalin is kind of hated and Stalin gets an awful lot of flack. But I feel like Lenin and Trotsky and those folk don't really get a whole lot of flack.
Yeah, no, yeah, but they were brutal and
super brutal.
But then you could also, there is the other thing of that this biography that I was listening to about Lenin was making was like a lot of the tactics that ended up getting implemented by Lenin and Stalin, like the secret police stuff,
right,
and everything. The Tsar was kind of doing that already.
Sure.
So there was a lot of that. So they sort of co-opted a lot of that.
I mean, I bet the Tsar was super brutal too.
Right.
I just think that nobody knows anything about the czars of Russia in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
But what's his name? Roosevelt skates by with Japanese internment.
Yeah. But no, not but. Like obviously that was very bad.
Right. Very naughty.
But but it is this idea of measuring the past relative to the other things that were going on at that time. So relative to what the other sort of powers were doing, that was obviously very benign. Not saying it was good.
Well, I don't think the UK was interning anybody, were they?
Well, no, but I don't think they had they didn't have a big population of Japanese people, I think.
Sure. That's true. They did have a big population of Jewish people fleeing to them, and they weren't interning them. But I guess they weren't at war with the Jewish people. Would they have been interning Germans? Yeah. That would actually be the question.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's where I do sort of agree with you that there was, certainly the West looked at Japanese people as lesser.
I mean, I was I don't know if you encountered this when you were reading about Roosevelt, but I had read that he had like some specific hatred for Japanese people. Like he was extremely racist against Japanese people specifically. And when he was in his 20s, he vowed that if he ever became president, he would go to war with Japan.
Yeah, no, I mean...
He, hated Japan for some reason.
Yeah. And then this is the thing that you learn when you go and read Mao is, there was reason to hate Japan because they were brutal also.
Of course, yeah.
And this isn't trying to, again, the point I was trying to make is definitely they treated, I don't think they would have interned Germans because they looked at them as, equals and Europeans and, these are white people.
Right.
And yes, so that is obviously not defensible, right? So in that sense, I agree, and it was bad. But then you look at what the Germans were doing to everybody, and that was
worse.
Level worse. And then you look at what was going on in China at that same time, which we didn't even know about, but it was horrific.
Yeah.
No,
dude.
And so
the world is brutal. People are brutal.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, it is.
Yes.
Good. That's a good place to end, right? The world's a cold, cold place, Antushka.
Yeah, right. It's true.
Cool.
All right.
I think this is good.
Yeah. Sweet.
I'm going to cut a lot out.
Are you?
Maybe. Probably. Okay. That's all good. All right, cool. Yeah, so next week around the same time.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Sounds good.
All right.
All right.
Cool.
See ya.
See ya.